The Hero Billboard chart is how the My Hero Academia world ranks its pro-heroes, based on their impact on society, popularity with the general public, and amount of incidents resolved. Many heroes try to become number one, and many heroes fail. But when you're a hero, it helps to be. Mark Grayson is one of the most recognisable superheroes in recent history, but against My Hero Academia's best, where would he stand? Using his series, I'm answering one question. Could Invincible become My Hero Academia's number one hero? After gaining his superpowers at 17, Mark Grayson wasted no time in getting into the family superheroing business. As Invincible, Mark was making all kinds of moves, and by the end of issue 5, he had already stopped 3 robberies, brought the end to a psycho teacher who had been putting bombs inside of students, held his ground against, talked down, and befriended Alan the Alien, who had been testing the protector of the wrong planet for 15 years, and prevented the first of many alien invasions with his father, Omni-Man. Bearing in mind that his first save was 2 weeks after getting his powers, he had done a whole lot in such a short amount of time with very little experience. Despite this lack of experience, very early on in his career, Mark had to stand up to one of the toughest opponents he'd ever face: his own father, Nolan Grayson. In an insanely traumatic turn of events, Mark had to decide between his father or the Earth. Using nothing but his newly acquired powers, good intentions, and most of the teeth in his skull, Mark lost the fight against his father, but managed to steer him away from his goal of taking over the world thanks to the power of love. Oh. This wasn't the most perfect first big solo save, but it was a huge sacrifice for the good of humanity and was a situation that only Mark could resolve. This is actually exemplified later on in the series when Angstrom Levy, a villain that has met multiple Invincibles from different realities, states that Mark is dangerous, ruthless, and evil in so many dimensions, and that there were very few dimensions where he was a good person. In theory, there wasn't that much stopping Mark from joining his father on the quest to take over Earth. Other Invincibles had joined him, or even killed him, but the Mark we follow from the main universe stood up against his father for the people of Earth. So, our Invincible is really a bit of a heroic anomaly. Once recovered, Mark got back out there, replacing his father as Earth's new protector. Throughout the series, Invincible resolves many incidents such as defeating random villains of the day, stopping cities from being destroyed, intercepting missiles to prevent villains from causing wars on Earth, a few more alien invasions here and there, helping Spider-Man take down a rampaging Doc Ock. The list goes on. Across 144 issues, I counted 70 incidents resolved, which was hard because I only have 8 fingers. This gives Invincible an average of 2 saves per issue. To me, that feels like a lot for a character with a reasonably short series. On the other hand, All Might is stated to have saved 62 cities and towns in 1 day, and Endeavour has the record of having the most saves of anyone in the series. Taking Endeavour out of the question, All Might is 8 saves away from Invincible in a single day, which isn't a very good sign. Invincible's numbers are clearly lower than All Might and Endeavour's, though it should be noted that he tackles much bigger threats than the both of them usually do, so it's possible he could compete with them based on the number of people saved per incident as opposed to the sheer amount of incidents. Unfortunately, a really tragic thing for Mark is that a lot of his really big and impressive incidents resolved are stuff that people on Earth probably wouldn't know about. Planets he's saved, intergalactic wars he's been part of, even if they are to protect Earth, at the very most will have been kept quiet by the government, if they're even aware of it. That being said, if it wasn't clear already, Mark's heroing range extends much further than planet Earth, and seems that he's called to go in wherever is necessary, since he's been recorded casually travelling 8,000 miles in less than 25 seconds, with an average of 800,000 kilometers per hour. With that acknowledged, Mark has quite a reputation on Earth, judging by how small-time criminals react to him. This shows that they think he's too big to deal with people like them. That might be how they feel, but Invincible makes sure to remind them that he's always got time to deal with the little guys. After losing his partnership with Cecil and the GDA, he takes it upon himself to patrol the city, so that he can personally ensure people's safety, since he wasn't working alongside an agency that monitors it 24/7. Patrolling is something Invincible has done since the start of his career, and during the time when he wasn't going out specifically to patrol, it was being handled by an organisation dedicated to minimizing damage, so he was getting out and into incident resolution much quicker. The potential Invincible has is genuinely quite incredible, as he's been shown travelling from America to Africa in a few minutes, meaning that if he was working with something like the World Heroes Association, he could tackle multiple threats across the world very quickly, which some of the biggest heroes in the universe's history, like All Might, Endeavour, Star and Stripe, Deku, and Lemillion, are quite frankly unable to do. Popularity, on the other hand, is a bit of a difficult conversation with Invincible. While, of course, he is responsible for saving many people and resolving lots of situations that would give him an edge here, there's kind of an elephant in the room. A big, unmistakably elephant-shaped elephant in this room. Issue 60 marks the beginning of the Invincible War storyline, which, to cut a long-ish story short-ish, has multiple alternate Invincibles attacking Earth with orders and intentions to, and I quote, make them fear Invincible, make them hate Invincible. This is very evidently some insane supervillain cope dialogue, and their plans were eventually foiled by Invincible and other iconic characters such as Spawn? But the key word there is eventually, and the stuff that did happen during this time were, well, described as events that leveled the world. Major cities were destroyed, the death toll was in the millions and actively rising, and to top it off, people weren't really sure if Invincible was involved in this. And honestly, would they even be wrong for assuming that? Like, his face and name and likeness are attached to one of the biggest tragedies in the universe's history. Yes, I said one of, because his name and face and likeness are attached to quite a few tragedies. One that really sticks out to me is an attack on Las Vegas that not only results in the total destruction of the city, but also results in the death of thousands. So, it's a few more bodies for the pile. To add salt into the wound, the supervillain that caused this was actually in the midst of evacuating hundreds of thousands of people from the city because he didn't believe they needed to die for his plan to work. Mark wasn't really supposed to know that he was indirectly killing thousands of people by interrupting Dinosaurus, but instead of just having a destroyed city, he ended up with a destroyed city and thousands of additional deaths. Okay, mistakes happen. He wouldn't do that again, would he? Oh, that's Mark rescuing the supervillain that wiped out Las Vegas. Oh, that's Mark's new supervillain partner setting off bombs to flood the Earth and killing 1 million people worldwide. It's genuinely really quite hard to make much of a case for Invincible's popularity on Earth, even if there are still some people on his side. Later on in the comics, some of these things are implied to get spun correctly and put him in more of a favourable light, but I think it's nearly impossible to be completely forgiven for being associated with millions of deaths. It doesn't really scream symbol of peace to me, and for that reason it's probably going to be hard for him to keep up with someone like All Might. Someone who is universally loved and is recognised as a pillar of their society is already too much for Invincible to keep up with. When you start throwing things in like merchandise and other influences like that, it starts looking a little bleak. Invincible has his fans, sure. He also has people that were personally inspired to make a change, for better or worse, because of his own mistakes. And the existence of those people lead to a lot of these previously mentioned disasters. It's clear that Invincible feels a lot of empathy for the people he's hurt, as he's seen talking down Powerplex, someone who was initially a villain as a result of Omni-Man's rampage. Despite getting the blame for the death of Powerplex's sister, and soon after the death of his family, Invincible never gives up on him, managing to defend his own actions while helping Powerplex with a hard-to-swallow pill. He killed his family. It wasn't Mark. And instead of leaving him to wallow in that realization, Invincible offers him kindness. Regardless of his treatment of Mark and the bad he had done in the world as a result of his hatred for Invincible, Mark recognizes the good he's currently doing. The future he'd have if he kept up his new life as a member of the Actioneers, and tells Cecil that if he can help Powerplex in any way, to let him know. While this is nice, and we do learn that Mark is constantly struggling with the weight of his own actions as someone that wants to change the world and do better, it's already happened. He might have convinced Powerplex of his innocence, but what about the rest of the world? His actions have, even if not intended, been the reason why the world, and the people in it, have suffered. Sure, he's not the sole reason why, but actions have consequences. And it just isn't quite possible to convince the world of your good intentions when many times they've resulted in such a significant loss. All of these things quite frankly blow even the worst events in My Hero Academia out of the water. And even if they were just as bad, which they're not, they typically fall on the fault of society, and are not directly linked to one man. However, as we've seen before, one man's contributions can certainly make the world a better place. It's interesting to examine how Mark is able to contribute to society outside of just beating up supervillains and rescuing people. How can someone like him act as a hard-working role model? Well, for starters, he has a private security firm, Invincible Inc., where he works with other superheroes who are on call to protect places like prisons and power plants that are most prone to attacks. In a world like My Hero Academia's, Invincible Inc. would work like an agency, especially since there have been occasions where Bulletproof, a member of the team, has operated on Invincible's behalf as Invincible. They have a small but good roster, so it's dependable and helps patch up issues with their security. Something that isn't really mentioned that often is the fact that Mark also helps out with incident cleanup pretty consistently. Anytime it's necessary, Mark shows up to clear debris, rescue survivors, and recover the bodies of any casualties during the conflict. Once claiming that he spent months recovering bodies after the events of the Invincible War, and that he had seen more death than he can bear. One of the best examples of his cleanup input comes early in his career. Mark went out of his way to help an entire alien society rebuild after an attempt at defending them from a Viltrumite attack, an effort that, quote, would have taken them generations without his input. Sure, this isn't an Earth-based thing and the aliens live a much shorter life, but it goes to show that Mark genuinely is a good person that wants to help people out. For something more human, take this time where he not only saved the family, but also bought them enough time to grab anything important to them and escape. This mindset has helped him across alternate universes too. Take for example this universe ruled by an evil Invincible and his Viltrumite empire. After getting stranded there and having to double as their ruler, in exchange for getting back to his own reality, Mark donates his body for cloning to give to that universe's Rudy, and has him protect that universe by masquerading as the leader of the Viltrumites. Rudy goes as far as to state that Invincible's contribution had saved their world. Speaking of the Empire, his biggest accomplishment as a role model is changing how the Viltrumite Empire operates. As Emperor, he offered the next generation of Viltrumites a new way. One that still makes them strong and powerful, but one that fights for peace and prosperity, not conquest. His earthly idealisms helped him to change the hearts of others as well, such as this aggressive alien ruler who was shocked by the Viltrumites' new ways of peace and cooperation, without having to kill each other. That is the new Viltrumite way, according to Mark. This is especially important given that throughout all of Invincible, Viltrum is regarded as a planet of conquerors, so to change public perception of that is, at the worst, admirable, and at best, mind-blowing. He keeps going, by the way, working to create peace amongst all planets and races, even helping another alien race immigrate to a better planet. This cements a legacy of goodness from himself all the way to the current Viltrum Empire. At the heart of all of his efforts, Mark Grayson is a good person, a good superhero, but the big question is, could he do the same for Earth? Probably, if you give him time. And his experience with intergalactic diplomacy would make him a #1 candidate for any possible alien societies that the Hero Association might cross paths with. Though, on My Hero Academia's Earth, it's more likely that Mark would cross paths with their supervillains before aliens. So, let's take a look at how he fares against some of the universe's biggest problems. For comparison's sake, I'd like to point out that Invincible shares many similarities with American pro-hero Captain Celebrity. Skyline's quirk is simply named Flight, which allows him to do the obvious, but also grants him the ability to generate an aerodynamic field that protects his body from physical harm, including heat and cold. This field can also extend over people to protect them too. Invincible's Viltrumite DNA provides him with an almost identical power. This is actually kind of flattering as far as My Hero Academia comparisons go, as Captain Celebrity is arguably one of the strongest characters we see in the series. From bullying kaiju to lifting a cruise ship full of people, there are only a couple of people in the My Hero universe that can compete with him physically. Though, when it comes to My Hero Academia villains, Invincible starts to look much scarier than Captain Celebrity and his peers when you look a little closer. In issue 28, Mark mentions in passing that he had never pushed himself that hard before after a close encounter with an enemy Viltrumite, and soon after, an exchange between Omni-Man and Invincible happens that acknowledges the lack of training he's done as a result of it. While on Earth, Mark had never even considered the fact that he might need to train to fight stronger threats, since the enemies he'd been fighting on Earth were just inferior to him. There should be very few villains in My Hero that are an exception to this rule. As a matter of fact, I don't think there should be a single one. For the most part, we don't see Mark take serious damage from anyone that isn't a Viltrumite throughout the entire series. Why would any of these guys be any different? And this implication of how much stronger he is happens at the beginning of his career, so this doesn't even account for all the growth he gets as time goes on. At the beginning of his training with Cecil, which is only 18 issues later, Mark is shown bench pressing almost 400 tons. So, pre-training Invincible is already stronger than the majority of people in the universe. Nothing on My Hero Academia's Earth is that new to him either. Nomu are just more versatile Rihanna-men. Invincible is immune to Darby's primary source of damage. Gigantomachia isn't even really anything too new to him either. And the others? As always, All For One and Shigaraki present some issues here and there, but generally speaking, All For One at his absolute strongest can be beaten by overexertion that causes him to rewind into nothingness. To his credit though, Mark could certainly be outsmarted by him in one way or another since he meticulously plans pretty much everything, but when it comes to physicals, Invincible has a pretty clear advantage, even with the insane amount of powers All For One could throw at him. Much like All For One, Shigaraki shouldn't physically be strong enough to do notable damage to Mark, but he does have the advantage of only having to touch him one time to get the kill on him. The concept of that is a little scary, but there are a few things Invincible has that counter decay. The most strange is that Mark passively generates a force field to protect him from the elements as he flies. Depending on how you interpret this, Shigaraki shouldn't be able to decay him as long as he's protected by something non-physical. On top of this, the smart atoms that protect him from extreme temperatures could very possibly adapt to decay. It's unclear how exactly decay works, but we've seen Viltrumites kind of resist attacks on an atomic level before. Regardless, Shigaraki is very difficult to get rid of thanks to super regeneration, though he'll be stretched thin by the overwhelming strength that Invincible presents, and go down with a little help from some friends. Since Invincible has the option to dispose of all of their villains by himself, or with the help from some other heroes in the world, his ability to protect Japan and the rest of the Earth is really second to none. He is evidently capable enough to resolve and keep up with some of the biggest incident resolvers in the series, emphasised by the fact that he claims he didn't know he had the capacity for exhaustion while fighting opponents on Earth. Mark is often recognised as a hero who has saved the planet many times, is held fondly by a lot of people, and has gone above and beyond for not just Earth, but other planets too. Despite this, I don't think it's possible for Invincible to become #1 hero based on the information presented in his series. As previously discussed, the Hero Association likely wouldn't recognise intergalactic involvement, and if you're generous enough to give it to him, there are some pretty questionable decisions and notable stains on his career that should really get in the way of his #1 spot. By the end of the series, Mark had totally moved past the idea of being a superhero and was long gone from Earth not long after. Mark was more focused on helping the entire universe develop peacefully, making sure to lead the Viltrumites the right way to spread peace throughout the universe. His impact on the entire universe makes it clear that where Mark falls short on Earth, he makes up for across the rest of the universe, making it a better place for everyone.